Hello and welcome back. So in the previous two parts, we've already built the two required logic app APIs, right? The first one will return all of the items for a particular category code, and the second one would return details of one item based on the item ID, right? And now as per the requirement, we have to publish them via the API gateway, right? So let's go ahead and start by going to the Azure portal, and then let's open the API gateway that we previously built in the API management exercise, right? So let's hop onto the Azure portal. So we are on the Azure portal right now, and you can simply click on this API management here, or if it doesn't show you in the recent services, you can always search for API management services, and it would show you the API gateway that you may have created for your hands-on exercise, right? So let's click on this Learn 360, which is the API gateway I have created, right? And then what we have to do is we have to add the additional APIs that we've created, right? Before we do that, let's go ahead and check as a developer how many APIs are currently there in this gateway, right? So how do we do that? We copy this developer portal URL, and let's open that in an incognito mode, right? So that it doesn't log you in as an admin. So there we go. And this is the developer portal. And if we go to APIs, then we can see currently there are 3 APIs available. The one that we've created in the previous exercises, right? The CI 101 language API that we created, again, using a logic app, right? And if you recollect, that translated any text into English language. So our goal is to add additional APIs to this list of APIs for the developers to use. So let's go back to the admin panel, and then here let's click on these APIs on the left pane here. Let's click on APIs. This is where you would add additional APIs, right? So even though we have to add, the logic apps that we have created, we are not going to choose the logic app right now. What we'll do is we'll start by adding a blank API, right? You would understand why I'm not choosing the logic apps right now in a minute, right? So let's start by clicking on blank API, and let's give it a name, items API. I'm also not defining the web service URL at this point of time, right? And in the suffix, I'm just adding items, and let's create. Okay, so it has created an empty API. So it has created the API library, but there are no APIs inside items API. Now let's go ahead and refresh the developer portal, and we should see that additional API here. But before we do that, let's add this items API into some products so that whoever has subscribed to these products can also see this library right now. There we go. And if I refresh the developer portal, it would show me the items API, but there won't be any operations for us to use, right? Let's refresh this. There we go. You see items API, right? And if we go inside that, obviously there are no operations, right? So let's go back and start by adding the operations. Now, if you remember, we have 2 operations to add, right? So get items by category code and get item by item ID. Let's start by adding the first one. So in this operation, let's add operation, and I'm going to name this get items by category code. Okay, and then this is a get operation, and in the URL we want to add get items by category code. In the description, let's write a one-liner, right? This operation will return items based on category code provided in the request. Okay, and let's hit save. Again, we've just added this operation in the front end. Okay, we have not yet defined which logic app or which API this operation should invoke internally, right? So let's do that. So this is our front end. It has the get operation, and then let's go back to the back end, right? This is where you would select your backend API. In our case, it's going to be a logic app, right? So let's edit this, and here we can configure what we want this API to call, right? So let's choose the target as a logic app. Let's browse, let's search, or let's select the logic app that we already created, right? So get items by category. Let's select this, select, and manual is the, again, it's the internal operation name for that logic app, right? So let's select this manual and select and save. There we go. So it will now automatically update the entire API operation based on this logic apps configuration, right? So let's go back to the developer portal and let's see this new operation is added or not, right? So back to the incognito mode, I'm going to refresh this and let's click on items API, and there we go. So you have one operation which is get items by category code, right? And here you go, it needs one input parameter which is category code, and this is the request URL, right? So when your developers would call this API, they would use this URL, right? So now if you see this URL, right, this is your domain URL. Then you have items as your main library, right? Inside these items, you can add all of your item related APIs. And then it has get items by category code, and then here category code equal to, this is where they would pass the value of category code, right? Let's go ahead and test this API. Try it, and the category code, I'm gonna use a sample category code 201 and hit send. Okay, so as you can see, it's giving me the error of it's not authorized request, right? Obviously, because I'm not yet logged in as a developer, right? So let me log in as a developer, and okay, so now I have logged in as a developer. So now it would allow me to test this API 201. Let's hit send. There we go, 200, okay, right? And there we see the list of items returned as a response for this category code 201, right? Let me try with 204 and hit send. And there we go, we have the response with items that has category code is equal to 204, right? So we've just added the first API. Now we'll come back to this enhancements of this developer portal, right? But before we do that, let's also go ahead and add second API, right? So here I'll add a second operation, and the name of the operation is going to be get item by item ID. Again, the URL, it's going to be get item by item ID. Let's write a brief description. This operation will return one item based on the item ID provided in the request parameter. And let's hit save. Again, we've just added the front end for this API. Let's go ahead and add the back end, right? So whenever this API is called internally, we want a logic app to be executed, right? So let's select the logic app. There we go, and get item by item ID. Select the name. There we go, and hit save. That's all we need to do to get started. So we've just published both of our logic apps over the API management portal. If we go back to the developer portal and if we refresh, we'll see the second operation here, right? Let's refresh. There we go. Get item ID, get items by item ID. So here we go. Here is the second operation that we just added, get item by item ID, right? Again, here is a very good URL that developers can use. This is how they would pass the item ID as part of the URL parameter, right? Let's go ahead and test this one as well. So for this, I need a sample item ID. Let me go ahead and grab the item ID from the database. I'm choosing this sample item ID, for example, 59736. Let's go back and use that 59736. And this time it should return me just one item, right? Let's hit send. And there we go. It returned the one item with all the details of that item, right? So we've just published both of our APIs over the API management portal. Now let's add a little more details to both of these operations, right? So what I'm going to do is let's continue using this API and let me get the sample output, right? So 59736 was the item ID. Let me get the sample output. Okay, I'll copy this output from here. Okay, let's copy this and let's tell the developers that when you use this method, this is how exactly you're going to receive the response, right? So let's go back to the portal. We are in our second API, which is get item by item ID. Now let's click on the front end, right? This is where we get to define all of the details that developers would see. So inside this, I want to add a response, right? A sample JSON response. So let's click on responses and then add a response. Now we want to add a response when it's 200 OK. That means when it is successful, this is how the response would look like, right? Let's click on the content type, which is going to be application and JSON. And let's add a sample here. This sample JSON would be displayed, right? Let's hit save. So we've added a sample response to this operation, right? Let's see how the developers can use this, right? Let's close this try window and let's refresh this. Okay, so here we already told them that you need to pass the item ID as a request parameter, but now we are also showing them, that if you pass a valid item ID, this is the exact response that you would receive, right? So that they can start planning how they want to use this response into their applications. Let's do the same thing with the category code API as well, right? Let's find the sample output and then we'll use that output to show that to the developers. There we go. So let's go ahead and copy this entire output here. Okay, let's copy that. Let's go back to the admin portal, select the second operation and let's edit the front end, right? Let's go to the responses, add a response 200 OK, and add the content type, which is application JSON, and this is the sample. Let's hit save, and that's all we need to do. So if we refresh this page, There we go, right? So rather than building sequence of documents or Word files, PDF files, you can use this developer portal to provide all the necessary details to your developers, right? So all we have to do is we have to let the mobile app developers know that use your developer's account and then go to the items API library, right? And inside this library, you would find both the methods get items by category code and get item by item ID. And the mobile app developers would be able to use this portal, and they would know exactly what request parameter to pass and what response to expect, right? And they wouldn't even know how you're getting the data, what technology you're using, whether you built a custom code or whether you're using a logic app, whether you're using a function app. They don't really need to know how you're getting them these details. But as an integration developer, you've used the logic app to build this API interfaces very quickly and deliver them to your mobile app development team, right? I hope you understood this, right? This is really important, and this is one of the most common scenarios. Okay, we have just built the basic APIs, right? It's not really doing a lot of things, but most of the times this is all you would be doing. There might be a couple of more actions or some more business processing. For example, use some data or replace some data inbound or outbound, do some kind of transformation. But apart from that, this is all you would be doing, right? If you work as an integration developer, make sure you follow these instructions, right? And make sure you do this hands-on your own. You can come up with your own examples, right? You have experience working in different industries on your own, so I'm sure you can come up with a lot more examples. And if you need help building any additional scenarios, right, reach out to me on the Slack channel. Let's talk about it, right? But make sure you follow these two examples, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.